Just learning that it is getting quite serious there in Washington, D.C., quite serious for the Biden family, as James Comer on the House Oversight Committee is expected to be releasing momentarily those subpoenas, or issuing, I should say, the subpoenas for the Biden family in what is believed to have been some kind of scheme in which family members were being paid for alleged access to then Vice President Joe Biden. So that's going down, just as well. Another court case is going down, right? Well, multiple court cases, I should say. He would deem this election interference. That is former President Donald Trump, because they're going after him every which way to Sunday. And he was just testifying in yesterday's hearings. I want to bring you some sound from former President Donald Trump. Meanwhile, some horrific stuff, of course, coming to us, horrible news about the elder gentleman who is now dead after suffering a brain hemorrhage after getting hit by a microphone piece by a pro-Palestinian protester. This is a Jewish man that died out in the Los Angeles area. Really just unthinkable stuff. You can see how this is starting to tear apart our country, certainly tearing apart the Democrat Party in ways that probably needed to happen, honestly, because the party had gotten so extreme and so left. And when you find yourself at the point of supporting Hamas, that's when you know it's time to draw a line in the sand. So there's that going on. Disney has a new executive it's bringing in, as the CEO, Bob Iger, tries to ward off and fend off Nelson Peltz's desire to remake the company, because, it's just been bleeding cash. And one of the reasons it's bleeding cash is because nobody wants to see anything Disney makes, including this new Snow White. There are now reports has spent already more than $300 million in production. That's a lot of money to spend on a live broadcast of Snow White, especially when nobody really seems as though they want to see it, right? So we'll discuss that too. Plus, we got to go to my favorite guy, Oliver Anthony, because I'll tell you, he is showing the world how you really need to be a musician. Really, really great stuff out of him. Anyway, welcome to the program, everyone. We are brought to you, as always, in part by LegacyPMInvestments.com, 1-866-589-0560. That is their number. If you're interested in diversification tools like gold, you can go check them out. I'll put it right here on the screen, 1-866-589-0560. But first, I want to get to the news, as I said, coming into us about James Comer and how he intends to subpoena family members related to Joe Biden. That's supposed to be happening really like any minute now. So this is all part of that impeachment inquiry. You see, it could actually happen as soon as Wednesday. It's part of the impeachment inquiry because they're trying to get to the bottom of this. How is it that so much money was shuffling through Hunter Biden's account? How is it that, there were all these businesses that sprouted up that were doing work internationally, even though, even Barack Obama had requested that members of his staff not have family members that were engaged in lobbying, and yet it was still going down anyway, going down and then some, right? That's being nice. You see, there is this check that's making a lot of news right now. This is one for $200,000 from Sarah and James Biden that was made to Joe Biden. The Democrat Party is saying, oh, no, nothing to see here, because this was just, it was just a loan that was getting paid back. Well, you see, there was another one, a $40,000 one, which if you listen to Comer, he would tell you that $40,000 wasn't a loan payback, but in fact was some kind of payback for the big guy, right? What did they say? Boblinski was saying 10% for the big guy. We've heard that one before. More financial records, all of these things coming forward, which cause everybody to have a whole lot of questions as to whether or not this family somehow was on the take. And chances are, given some of the, how shall we say, sort of shortcuts that they were taking, which are really kind of surprising, one thinks maybe that indeed was the case. When I talk shortcuts, I'm talking taxes, and we'll get into that in just a second. But I want you to hear from James Comer, the warning he had. This was on Sunday. As I said, this is going to hit any day now, any minute now. It's expected perhaps Wednesday. But again, big news, because the Biden family, and we're talking about over 12 members, is about to get subpoenaed.
$40,000 check that Joe Biden received all the way back to that WhatsApp message where Hunter Biden claimed his father was sitting beside him, where he was shaking down the Chinese operative. That's where that $40,000 was triggered. Just a few weeks after that text message, that $40,000 landed in Joe Biden's pocket after the Bidens laundered it. But that money came from China, further evidence that Joe Biden benefited from his family's influence peddling scheme.
Okay, so that's the allegation. And when you look at these financial records, and I've spent a lot of time going through some of these, what you see is really some complicated things with money getting transferred from overseas sources to Hunter Biden's various businesses, and then, well, to various members of the family. And then in the case of the check that you just saw, perhaps to Joe and Joe Biden himself, right? 10% for the big guy. Look, they had quite a business going on, and they shouldn't have had it to begin with, only in that the president, who was the guy that Joe Biden worked for at the time, had said, listen, I don't want this going down. I don't want any family members lobbying. And what's happening? Oh, his son, his deadbeat son, who had a drug addiction, really like out there because you have no damages. So how do you have a trial if there's no damages? Letitia James, that's the attorney general, who's basically raised money and campaigned on the idea that she would get Trump. Well, she went in there and she's making all these allegations. She sued him to the tune of $250 million in a civil suit. Plus, they want to make sure he's no longer doing business in New York. That can't really happen when there's, again, I go back to no damages. In this particular case, and just to lay it out for everyone so that you fully understand what's going on, she's basically saying you inflated the value of your properties, including Mar-a-Lago, in order to get loans, in order to do business and build other properties, et cetera. And you inflated that. And you said, the square footage was X when it was really Y. You said it was worth X when it was really worth only Y. Of course, hey, it's real estate, beauty in the eye of the beholder on that one in terms of the valuation. Apparently, the bank didn't have a problem with it because Deutsche Bank that was making the loan was like, yeah, we'll go with X or Y or whatever it was. And on top of that, Donald Trump actually had disclaimers in there that said, do your own diligence because it may not be worth X or Y. And yet, Letitia James, who you've seen the video before, I don't need to show you again, but she's just over and over and over again told everybody on the campaign trail they needed to vote for her because, well, she was going to go and get Donald Trump. Well, this is what she's trying to do. So she's, it's lots of red tape. He's going to be up in court. He did make an appearance just yesterday. He has said he thought it went very well, but he's also pretty angry because in this case, I don't know what you call this. You're making up cases? It's a kangaroo court? Just so what? So you can try and hurt him in the polls? It's not working, by the way, but it is what you might call election interference. Just a little, don't you think? Here he is.
That was ridiculous. The numbers are much greater than on the financial statement. And we've already proven that. They said Mar-a-Lago's worth $18 million. Mar-a-Lago's worth anywhere from probably 50 to 100 times more than that. And it's a terrible, terrible thing. These are political operatives that I'm going to be dealing with right now. You have a racist attorney general who made some terrible statements, and we just see some more that came over the wires today. It's a very sad situation for our country. We shouldn't have this. This is for
it is a sad situation. That comes to us courtesy of Fox News. I believe it was the pool reporter there getting that information in that sort of press conference that he had as he came out of the courtroom, or rather, maybe he was going in at that point. We do have another bit of video where he says it went very well. But I think the bottom line here is you got a guy who did build a business, who borrowed some money, filled out a bunch of paperwork. Deutsche Bank's like, here's the money. Nobody lost money. Deutsche Bank got paid back. So it's not as though Letitia James can say, hey, these poor investors over here, they lost money. Or that bank, they really screwed up. They shouldn't have lent you that. She can't do that. So what is this about other than just pure politics? And that's, I guess, what is so sickening. But so long as we're going to talk about court cases and who actually should be in front of a judge. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. That would be Hunter and Joe Biden and all the other members of the family that somehow were in on this deal to have all these various companies, including things like Rosemont Seneca, where they were getting payments from China, payments from Ukraine. It's really pretty disgusting. And here's the president's response.
Where's the money? I'm joking.
Mr. President,
It's a bunch of malarkey.
Mr. President, what do you
Yeah, Bunch of malarkey. Malarkey. I don't think so, buddy. I think you get yourself what you might say a good old-fashioned problem on your hands. And we're not just talking about what's going on internationally. We're not talking about the border. We're not talking about Bidenomics, which clearly isn't working since everything costs more, including what? McDonald's value meal? That's the best. Did you guys see that? The $16 value meal? I think it's in New York. I mean, anytime they try and tell you Bidenomics is working, just come back with, wait, what? Yeah, Bidenomics. That's a fancy way of saying inflation, because I know that my McDonald's meal that I used to get for $4.99 is like $15. I'm telling you, unbelievable. Not to mention the stuff overseas, which we'll get to in a second. But before we do, I just want to spend a little bit more time on all of this alleged business that was going on between China, Ukraine, Romania, and Hunter Biden. And not just Hunter, right? Like, let's be pretty clear about that. I think there's a whole lot more than just Hunter involved. We've heard from Devin Archer, who told us, you know what? It was all about the big guy. All about the big guy. Like, and we know who the big guy was and is. It was all about promoting his image. And that's why you see things like this. That's why you see these massive amounts. That's why you know the National Archives, actually, this is an old story I have up right now where they were saying there were some 5,000 some odd emails. Now, it's actually a whole lot more. Joe Biden had some, 82,000 emails. 82,000. I mean, really and truly. We deserve better, do we not, as a country? Don't we deserve a little better than that? I sure think so. I mean, I don't know how Hunter Biden was able to do this, because there were so many suspicious activity reports. Listen, your bank can cancel you for any reason these days. There was a big article in the New York Times about this just the other day, like small business owners getting canceled by big banks and not having any idea why, because you tripped something in an algorithm. Maybe you took out too much cash that week. Maybe you put in too much cash that week. Maybe they just don't like your name. Who knows? Like, something in the algorithm gets triggered and you can be in trouble and get bounced from the bank. And, you know, there was more than 70 of these things that were triggered. I don't know if he got bounced from the bank. I mean, actually, if you listen to Comer would tell you this is a giant cover-up, and everybody's somehow involved, from the Treasury Department that didn't want to have to release the information about the SARS suspicious activity reports, to the FBI, which, we know they didn't really want to have to do their investigation. David Weiss, now the special prosecutor in all of this, getting effectively turned down, right, when he wanted to bring charges in California and in Delaware. So what was really going down? A protection mechanism. So, you know, you don't have to pay your taxes, apparently. And that's exactly what happened in the case of Hunter Biden. There was nearly $2 million in taxes, possibly more, that he was supposed to have paid, didn't pay it. And on top of that, this stuff was all international. How do you not register as a foreign agent if you're lobbying on behalf of foreign countries? I mean, that's mind-boggling to me. How do you get around all those rules? Oh, I get it. You know what? You're Joe Biden's son. You know what? You want to get around rules too? You just pay me. I'm Joe Biden's son, and I got all the access in the world, and I'll make sure you're A-okay. Effectively, that is what is being alleged here, that he did that kind of stuff. And yet, no, Joe, he's proud of the guy. I almost said kid. Watch.
First of all, my son's done nothing wrong. I trust him. I have faith in him, and it impacts my presidency by making me feel proud of him.
Oh, yeah, real proud. You know, that one blows me away. I just, look, I feel for him as a parent. I get it. It's got to be awful, right? You know, your kid's on drugs. He's just totally messed up. He's clearly got a women issue. There's so much wrong with him. It's not even almost comprehensible, right? Like, I'm sure that has caused him a lot of pain. A lot of pain. That said, what kind of guy are you if you know that your son is such a screw up, and you enable him by allowing him to continue his special foreign agent lobbying job without even registering? When your own boss, Barack Obama, said, hey, no can do. Like a normal parent would say, okay, kid that's 50, right? Or maybe he was 47 back then. Hey, buddy, you know what? You can't do that gig anymore. You can't do that job. You're going to have to go back to the finger painting because daddy's boss said it's a no-go. Ethically, it's not good. And if your son says, well, F you, dad, I'm going to do it anyway. At that point, you start to say, okay, for the sake of my son, for the sake of my family, for the sake of my country, do I really need this gig as vice president of the United States? I don't think so. I don't think so, because I'm not going to put my country in the position of something inappropriate, such as what could have happened and what's being alleged, of course, as you well know, is that Victor Shokin, who was investigating Burisma, who was the $83,000 a month client of Hunter Biden, Victor Shokin was fired because Joe Biden demanded he be fired because, well, Burisma didn't want to get investigated anymore by Victor Shokin. I mean, that's the story. And by the way, Joe Biden didn't do himself any favors when he went to the Council on Foreign Relations and in an interview with Richard Haas said, you know what? I made sure I fired that guy. And so as you put two and two together here, you're starting to ask these questions, or at least Comer's definitely asking these questions, as he should, as every American should, about just exactly what the relationship was between father and son and the business itself. You know, reporters are starting to ask questions. Granted, there's a lot going on these days, but they were asking questions because there was, for example, that Hunter text. I mean, there's been a couple of them. One in which he tries to shake down a Chinese energy company executive saying, hey, I'm sitting here with my dad and you better pay up or else. And then there was that other time he was telling his daughter, hey, at least you're not going to have to pay part of your income to Pops like I did for all these years. Anyway, Karine Jean-Pierre, she was asked months ago. She refused to answer these questions about Hunter's text, which really is kind of perplexing. I mean, I know she doesn't want to go there, but like, you have to answer these questions.
Can I follow up on that?
No, I just called in somebody. Go ahead.
Yeah. So Curley wouldn't answer James's question, though. Are you going to answer the question? I mean, not a reasonable question to ask where the President of the United States was involved, as this message seems to suggest, in some sort of coercive conversation for business dealings by his son. Is that something, if he wasn't, then maybe you should tell us.
So here's the thing, and I appreciate the question. I believe my colleague at the White House Counsel has answered this question already, has dealt with this, has made it very clear. I just don't have anything to share outside of what my colleagues have shared, and so I would refer you to him and the DOJ. Just not going to comment from here.
Text message.
I will. What I can tell you is I know that my colleague has dealt with this. He addressed this at the White House Counsel. I just don't have anything else to share.
In the shakedown attempt?
I just answered the question. I just answered the question.
Yes or no? Was the president involved in the shakedown attempt?
Stephen, I just answered the question. It's not up to you how I answer the question. I just answered the question by telling you my colleagues at the White House Counsel has dealt with this, and I would refer you to them. Go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. So as it turned out, her colleagues at the White House hadn't actually answered the question. So the reporters got kind of annoyed. And the next day they went back again and she punts. And that's what she keeps doing, except those times that she sort of totally steps in it. Anyway, one of the other things that keeps coming up is whether or not actually, there is still access that might be for sale. Because listen, if Joe Biden and his son, had a deal before, is it possible that there's kind of a deal now? And reporters are starting to ask that question. In particular, here's one journalist asking Karine Jean-Pierre about somebody who was spending a lot of time at the White House, who allegedly had given a very large gift somehow to the Democrat Party and also had bought some of Hunter Biden's finger painting. I saw one of you laughing about that. Yeah, that did not go unnoticed. Finger painting, I don't know. Maybe he's an artist, whatever. It's kind of an interesting career choice to just start up all of a sudden. Anyway, this particular real estate investor somehow then landed a kind of posh gig protecting America's image overseas. And so naturally, reporters were asking about it. And here's KJP, her response when they're like, hey, is there any conflict of interest?
Elizabeth Naftali. She's made more than a dozen visits here to the White House and met with some of the president's most senior advisors. Can you tell us a little bit more about those visits, why she was here?
I would have to look into that. I've not been tracking these visits that you're mentioning to me.
Thank you,
Anyway, that was a situation where that reporter was asking why it was that somebody had been making so many visits after having made some donations and bought some art, allegedly trying to draw some kind of connection. Dare we even go there, right? Anyway, I think there's a lot of things that need to be answered. On top of it, Ukraine has been quite costly for us here in the U.S., and so people are questioning that as well in terms of the money that's being spent, the fraud that has happened over there, right? Like that's been well documented. And they've actually, the U.S. has had to help Ukraine push out various heads of defense because the last couple heads of defense, along with their deputies, have been like siphoning off money to go to Dubai. So, yeah, I mean, the American taxpayers don't deserve that. We deserve some transparency. And I think that it's high time. It's high time that we start to really demand it. And this is going to move forward. I do think that you're going to be looking at a president who most likely will be impeached. It's going to happen. So then what happens, right? Kamala can't get it. Like Kamala can't get this job. So then does it become, oh, I don't know. Oopsie, we got something wrong with my shot here. Do we not? Okay. How's that? You're still reeling from looking at the screen because you see Michelle Obama on it. There's a lot of talk that Michelle Obama may actually run next year. Ted Cruz is floating that idea. He's done it a couple of times. There's the guy who wrote the Michelle Obama book who stated this rather recently, saying, look, if you look at sort of the similarities between everything that Michelle Obama is doing versus what Barack Obama did in preparation to running, it's quite similar. And he seems to think that indeed it will be Michelle Obama in 2024, not Joe Biden. And whether or not, the impeachment or whatever comes out about the family and the finances, et cetera, has anything to do with it, or whether it's just going to be he's too darn old, we're not sure yet. But listen to the gentleman who wrote this biography on her, Joel Gilbert.
The allegations that have come out in the media in the last few weeks really were around for years. David Garrow's book that had the quote where Obama said he makes love to men in his imagination came out several years ago. And of course, Larry Sinclair was from way back in 2008. So the fact that these are coming to the surface tells you that I think there's something going on in Obama world. And I make the case that I believe that Joe Biden is on his way out. I think that's pretty much the consensus. Nobody really believes he'll be the candidate in 2024 because of health, because of corruption, because of his terrible record. And I make the case in my film and book that Michelle has been pretty much copying Barack Obama's path to the White House. Barack had a voter registration organization in Chicago called Project Vote before he ran for president. Michelle founded something called When We All Vote that's supported by the Soros Group for $26 million. She's been running around the country registering people for several years. Barack wrote 2 autobiographies, Dreams from My Father and The Audacity of Hope. Sure enough, Michelle wrote 2 autobiographies, Becoming and The Light We Carry. They're also on Netflix as TV specials. And of course, Barack was the keynote speaker who introduced John Kerry at the 2004 Democrat convention. Sure enough, Michelle introduced Joe Biden at the 2020 Democrat convention.
That's coming to us from our friends over at Real America's Voice. Anyway, will she do it? I think there's probably a decent chance. And look, I think that Hunter's going to get taken down some way, somehow. In the meantime, you got Kamala out there who is just, well, not the brightest woman, shall we say. I don't know as Michelle is either. I've actually not read her dissertation, and I've only seen her on the campaign trail and known what a disaster she was there. I mean that. A disaster in that they really, at one point, and I saw 2 campaigns, I covered 2 campaigns, with him. She was such a disaster that they kind of had to just like keep her in the background because she was so polarizing and people really didn't like her. Now, times have changed, right? Apparently nowadays over at Harvard, you can be pro-terrorist and be sanctioned by the university. Horrible. Claudine Gay has still not come out and said one word about the student who is perceived to be Jewish on campus getting mobbed by that group, literally mobbed. A group surrounded him of pro-Palestinian protesters, putting scarves in his face. He was trying to get away. He couldn't. They started screaming shame. One of the people there was head or one of the editors at the Harvard Law Review. I mean, it's crazy. And nobody's saying boo. And then there was the situation out on the West Coast. You have that horrible, horrible story of an older man that was actually hit in the head with one of the microphone devices that the pro-Palestinian protester was using, and he suffered a brain hemorrhage and he has since died. And then there was the woman that we heard about who allegedly drove her car into a school that she believed was a school of Jewish children. I mean, I'm like, what country is this? I don't believe anybody's been arrested out in California. This gentleman, right? He has died, that was hit by the pro-Palestinian protester. The woman who said this to the police and why she was driving her vehicle into the school, it's now just alleged. I mean, of course, you have to actually follow through with, I guess, the court case, et cetera, right? But, innocent until proven guilty. But I got to tell you, for goodness sakes, there is no place for this in our society. And there is no way that we should be somehow accepting or looking at this as though it's okay. But I got to tell you guys, this is what this movement is about. This is what it's always been about. Don't kid yourself. BLM that wants to destroy the nuclear family. BLM that's on the side of the terrorists. I mean, hey, in Chicago, they literally tweeted their support within hours of the Hamas attacks. And then there's this little clip from Patrisse Cullors from 2015 saying that she thought we needed to get rid of Israel. This is where they are, guys.
The other thing I'll say is Palestine is our generation South Africa. And if we don't step up boldly and courageously to end the imperialist project that's called Israel, we're doomed. And I think that I had learned about Palestine for a long time. I had known about it, been wanting to travel, and I was really, really grateful when the Dream Defenders asked me to come on the delegation. But nothing would have prepared me for the level of militarization and the level of violence that we would witness those 10 days inside of Palestine. Nothing would have prepared me for the ways in which we witness people's terror. People live in terror on a daily basis. And nothing would have prepared me for how much clarity I would have on why we have to be a part of Palestinian solidarity.
Yeah, you see? Because it's all those successful people that tried to colonize, and we got to go after them now. Listen, there's a theme here. I want to shift gears a little bit and just talk about Disney, because Disney is one of those companies that kind of subscribe to everything that Patrisse Cullors wants you to believe in. A really tricky time for Disney, because you know what? The rest of the world just isn't there. The rest of America just isn't there. They're not psyched to go and take their kids to some of the shows that Disney has been putting out. And you know what? Disney just kind of has a bad habit of ticking off everyone, including the small people community that were really kind of annoyed because, hey, you know what? Snow White and Seven Dwarfs was casting tall people. It's like they just couldn't do it. They just couldn't figure it out. They kept making mistake after mistake after mistake. And we now just found out how much these mistakes might be really costing them. I think it could actually cost this guy, Bob Iger, his job. Look, he's trying to sell off some of these assets, trying to get creative. He wants to sell ABC. Good news for you who do not like The View, because that means I suspect Whoopi and Joy and the rest of them wouldn't be too long for the place. But anyway, here's Bob Iger speaking way back this summer on CNBC saying he wanted to sell these assets.
Transformative work is dealing with businesses that are no-growth businesses and what to do about them, and particularly the linear business, which we are expansive in our thinking about, and we're going to look expansively about opportunities there, because clearly it's a business that is going to continue to struggle.
Well, let's stop there for a second then and let me ask you about it. We're talking, I guess, ABC, the network, the stations, but then the cable networks as well.
Yes, correct.
FX, Nat Geo. Is it possible you would look to sell them?
We're going to be expensive. I think if you can interpret what that word means.
Wow. Expensive. If you can interpret what that means, I can interpret it. It means we're going to sell them. We're going to sell them. So, hey, take that, whoopee. Anyway, the other thing that they could they get out of would be this Snow White production with Rachel Zegler, who's just been a train wreck from the very beginning. You know, she said all kinds of things about, well, Snow White herself. She doesn't like the character. She doesn't like the plot. I'm not entirely sure why she's in the movie. You can see our sponsorship coming onto the screen again, like cpminvestments.com. That's actually, there we go. Anyway, look, Rachel Zegler doesn't like the character, doesn't like the story. She really shouldn't be in the film. But in the meantime, Disney has already spent an alleged $330 million on its live action Snow White. Okay, headline. Disney has reportedly spent $330 million on its live-action Snow White movie. So is it any wonder that they're really concerned? This is according to Mail Online. They're worried. They're worried the whole thing's going to bomb because, you know, nobody likes Rachel Zegler right now. The dwarfs are all angry because, well, it was Snow White and the 6 tall people and one dwarf. Yeah, that was kind of a problem. And, well, you know, it's just not looking like it's going to fly. Plus, you get a little problem over here. That would be courtesy of the Daily Wire, which decided through Benke Productions, one of its production arms, to release a movie starring Brett Cooper as Snow White. This is like, you know, now they're up against the real Snow White.
Once upon a time, in time a prince would come.
Yeah, that's the movie that you can see with your kids, right? Anyway, I wish them so much success with that. So $330 million, possibly, if that report is true, down the drain. The stock price is under so much pressure. So in comes a guy named Nelson Peltz, who runs something called Tryon Funds. It's a big hedge fund, right? And he's an activist investor, and he gets in there and says, gee, you're doing this, and this wrong. You're spending too much money. You don't have the right priorities. You got to actually shape up. And so Bob Iger, the one who's trying to get the place sort of together in his own little way, is under a lot of pressure. And because he's under so much pressure, he knows he's got to make changes. And so now he just brought in a new chief financial officer, maybe who will help make sure they don't spend $330 million on a production of Snow White that they're really nervous about. The new guy, he's from PepsiCo. And he's been through these kinds of things before, right? Where you have shareholder activists that are like, hey, what's going on? So he's seen this movie before. And so Bob's hoping that the new guy from PepsiCo can actually help him out. And perhaps, his name is Hugh Johnston, perhaps shape things up in his favor. Apparently, he brought revenue at PepsiCo to about $86 billion last year from $58 billion back in 2010. So he's certainly got, you know, some street cred on Wall Street, if you would. And I'll tell you, Disney needs a lot of that these days. You know who does not need any street cred at all? This guy is just amazing. And he's getting just nominated for all kinds of awards. He's getting all these Billboard awards. It's really, really, really great news. Like to see somebody be so successful that has such a great, authentic way about themselves. And that's Oliver Anthony.
Well, I've been selling my soul, working all day, overtime hours for bullshit pay, so I can sit out here and waste my life away, drag back home and drown my troubles away. It's a damn shame what the world's gotten to. People like me, people like you, wish I could just wake up.
Do you like them? Do you like them? We got our framing that we're working on here today in the show, clearly. Anyway, I like him. I think he's fantastic. And this one really got me. Do you know that he just did a concert the other day, and he started that concert by reading some passages from the Bible, reading passages about humility. And I thought, you know, well, that's really interesting, especially in this woke day and age where, you know, things like religion are so, I mean, I guess it's, unless it's the Muslim religion and you're from Palestine, are out of favor, right? Like you're not supposed to be religious, and certainly, Christians forget about it. Anyway, he read the First Corinthians chapter 1 verses 26 through 29, which begins, God chose the foolish things of the world to shame the wise. God chose the foolish things of the world to shame the wise. God chose the weak things of the world to shame the strong. And it continues, God chose the lowly things of this world and the despised things and the things that are not to nullify the thing that are, so that no one may boast before him. And so the idea is, you know what, you're humble. We're all humble in the face of God. And isn't that the truth? And I think his humility is just really something refreshing, something remarkable to see. It should be something that I think we all carry with us through every day of our lives. And most definitely artists, musicians, people that are having such an impact on worldviews, people who do what I do. I hope that everybody could have some of that humility, because that's what we need to remember, that we're very small in the overall scheme of things. And it's a very big world out there. And that kind of selflessness and authenticity is what is really enormously helping him to succeed. You saw the thing, right, with the $100 tickets. And he's like, yeah, no way, no how. I don't want people to have to spend $100 to come and hear my music. And he's one of the few musicians out there where I could actually play that clip for you. I can't do that very often. There's all these rules governing that. So he's great. I love his songs. I heard somebody playing it in a pickup truck as I was going down the highway, and this is in the Northeast the other day. And I was like, yeah, you know what? This is great. It's catching on, and I love it. You guys listening to it too? I see your comments on Snow White. Yes. And Oliver Anthony, you're a fan. I see it. That's you're like Steven, you're a fan of Oliver Anthony. I love seeing that. Look, it's really, really good to see you all today. I wish I could just wake up and it not be true. Don, those are his lyrics, and my goodness, right? There's a lot of truth in all of that right now. We all wish that the world wasn't quite going the direction it's going in. And I think that as you look at the polls that came out this week, the New York Times, everybody's so surprised. Democrats are shocked. And I'm just saying, you know what? You shouldn't be shocked, because when things get that bad and people feel that rudderless, well, they respond, and they respond by demanding change. The change is not going to come from Gavin Newsom. The change is not going to come from Michelle Obama. The change is not going to come, frankly, from anyone on the left. I think you've got to have somebody there who represents conservative values, American values, which we all hold dear. You look at Gavin Newsom, he buys into the DEI stuff fully. I mean, he's the one who wants to give $5 million to anyone who says they were a descendant of a slave in California. You want that guy for president? We have to get back to our origins, which is that we're a meritocracy. And if you work hard and you push yourself, you should have a chance in this country and in this world. Certainly in this economy, right? And if you don't have a chance because the education system is stacked against you because, I don't know, they want to make sure that you no longer have to give the right answer in math because they've got equitable math. That's the rage, right? They're talking about that in Pittsburgh. They did in California. They're talking about it in parts of the Northeast. You don't have to have 1 + 1 = 2. No, because we just want to feel good when we do math. Well, how is that doing anything to enable people to get ahead, to help them? Instead, you're just keeping them down, kind of like the Palestinian Authority and Hamas did with the Palestinian people. You can't build up anything, no, because the Jews over here, they got it all, and they're gonna keep you down. That's that mentality of us versus them, that victim mentality that gets you nowhere fast. And so I'm sick of hearing it, and I'm sick of the political class that's spouting it. Yeah, there are things we can do. Let's start by having tax incentives to keep people married, maybe, instead of saying, yes, they did in the 60s, and this doesn't quite exist in its same form. But remember when they introduced welfare initially and the whole deal was you couldn't have a man in the house? Give me a break. I mean, how did that help that community? It didn't. How does it help any community to turn your nose up at religion which helps communities come together and reminds people of things like humility, like Oliver Anthony was just telling us, reminds people of being good individuals. They want to get rid of all that. Well, because they're, dare we forget, communist Marxists. They want to get rid of all of it, including the nuclear family. That's what we're up against, ladies and gentlemen. So no, the left can't handle this, not unless they completely reinvent their party. Can they do that? I'm not so sure. I don't think they can. And so consequently, I'm left very concerned, devastated by all that we're seeing, and really hopeful that things will start to change. Do me the favor, make sure you subscribe to the podcast over on Apple, on Spotify. Like it here, hit the bell. If you're a first timer, make sure that you're getting the alerts, and I'll see you tomorrow.